Hey, good evening, everyone. As I said, my name is Gary Mond. I'm Chairman of the National Jewish Assembly. In a moment, I'm going to introduce our guest speaker for the evening, Lieutenant Colonel Maurice Hirsch. But before I do, I just wanted to remind you, we've got a trip going to Israel, a week beginning the 7th of September. We have precisely 2 places still to fill on that trip. So if anyone wants to go to Israel with us, week beginning 7th of September, it's a fantastic trip. Please let us know. And as I said, there's just 2 places left. Okay, it now gives me great pleasure to introduce our guest speaker this evening, Lieutenant Colonel Maurice Hirsch. Maurice is the director of the Initiative for Palestinian Authority Accountability and Reform at the Jerusalem Center for Security and Foreign Affairs. Maurice previously served as director of the Military Prosecution for Judea and Samaria. Since retiring from the IDF, Maurice has worked as the head of legal strategy for Palestinian Media Watch, as a senior military consultant for NGO Monitor, an advisor to the Ministry of Defense, and head of an advisory committee in the Ministry of the Interior. Maurice was the architect of the Israeli law that strips citizenship from Israeli terrorists who have been convicted for terror offences and have been sentenced to a custodial sentence and received payments from the Palestinian Authority as a reward for their disgraceful acts of terrorism. So it gives me now great pleasure to invite Maurice to speak to us. Maurice, over to you.
Thank you very much, Gary, and good evening to everyone. Thanks for joining us. I am going to, if I may, just share my screen so I can just give a small presentation here as we go along. I think it'll just be better and easier for understanding. Here we go. This should work, I think. Okay, so I hope you can all see the title on the screen. Gary, just give me a nod if you can see the titles. Fantastic. Okay,
well,
so good evening.
Before you carry on, can I just ask everybody, make sure that you're on mute, and can I also ask everybody, if you want to ask questions, please go to the where you raise your hand on the bottom of the screen and click on it on the react button, click on it, and then we can line up the questions ready to be asked as soon as Maurice has finished talking. Thank you. Maurice, over to you.
Okay, so thank you very much again. I'll delve straight into the subject of aid to Gaza, and then the question mark as to starving Gaza and the lies that I believe that the world is being told by the Hamas propagandists, and I'll suggest possibly a few reasons why that is the truth. So aid going into Gaza, let's just get a few basic things down. Does Israel even have an obligation to provide Gaza with aid? What about aid going to the hostages? Should Israel provide the aid in the knowledge that the aid will actually support Hamas? Who should be distributing the aid, right? If we all remember the debacle of the US floating pier in Gaza, how do you get the aid into Gaza? The US spent $350 million building a floating pier, which then fell apart within a week and a half. So with all of those questions put together, let me just run through them very, very quickly. No, Israel does not have an obligation to provide the enemy with aid, specifically when we know that aid is going to help our enemies and go to Hamas and support their war effort. That's the number one, that's the basic. Who should provide the aid, and in the knowledge that it's going to possibly go to Hamas, puts us in a dilemma. If you remember at the beginning of the war, there were discussions in the Israeli cabinet and in the Israeli public. Should we even be providing anything to Gaza while they continue to hold our hostages? And really, there is no good solution here. We don't want to give aid that will go to Hamas and will support their war effort. On the other hand, we have no interest. We have never had any interest in causing starvation in the Gazan population. And on the other hand, if we don't provide the aid through some type of a mechanism that goes via Israel, the fear is that the aid will be provided by other actors, and the aid sacks will be filled with bullets, as we've already seen, at the very best, and if not, explosives and rockets at the very worst. That's those were some of the questions that came up at the beginning. How do we do this? What do we do this? The mechanism that was invented at the time was that the aid trucks would go in maybe through Egypt. They would come first to Israel to be checked, and then they would go back through Rafah and then into the rest of Gaza. I'm going to show you a map, just the next slide along, just to explain a little bit about Gaza, just so that we can make sure that we're all on the same page. That was while we Israel were operating in the northern Gaza Strip. Obviously, everything changed last May 2025, when we eventually got down to the southern area of Gaza, and we went into the Philadelphia corridor and into Rafah. And so the way that the aid has gone into the Gaza Strip has really adapted itself to the developing operational system situation on the ground. And it's something which was a necessity, unfortunately, of the war. You've seen, I'm sure, pictures of Israelis trying to stop the aid convoys going into Gaza. What does it mean that we're even, someone asked me, well, why are Israelis stopping the aid? Well, who feeds their enemy? How much aid did the UK give to the Germans during World War II? The answer is nothing. You won't find another country in the world that during a war with its enemy does provide and is forced to provide aid to that population in order to help them keep on fighting. So we really are in I think, a very unique situation. I have to be very blunt with this, as if the audience will allow me. This is not an international standard. This is a Jew standard. Let there be no questions about this. This is a standard that has been set only for the Jewish nation. No other nation in the world would ever be expected to help its enemies. The Ukraine is not expected to help Russian civilians, and Russian civilians and Russia isn't expected to help the Ukrainian civilians, because that's just not what you do in war. But here we are. Israel is being required, and Israel is in effect giving aid to the Gazan population. I'm not sure why. 1 second. There. Okay, so the Gaza Strip. Let's just put it all into perspective. You can see this where the Gaza Strip is in relation to Israel and really to Egypt. And here we have the bigger map on the bottom. I'm showing you the map because there are things that I'm going to later specifically discuss. Here in the north, obviously, we have Bet Hanun, Jabalia, the areas that IDF forces have operated in time and time again, trying to clear out the Hamas terrorists. We have Gaza City, which is really this quite a big expanse here in the middle, where we've been fighting before and we're going to be fighting again, as was recently decided by Israel's cabinet just this week. And then you move to the central area of the Gaza Strip, Deir al-Balach. This is an area where predominantly there hasn't been so much fighting until now. That's the area that's called the central Gaza camps, where we believe many of the last of the Hamas terrorists are held up. Many of our hostages are probably being held there. And that's an area where you'll see on television pictures of markets in the Gaza Strip and restaurants functioning, markets full of all the food you would want. That you're seeing predominantly in that area of Deir al-Balach. Just above Deir al-Balach over here, where I'm pointing on the screen, is an area called Wadi Gaza, right? The Valley of Gaza. It's a strategic area. I'll explain to you why in a second, why I'm pointing that out. Then you move south towards Khan Yunis, Rafah, the Philadelphia corridor on the border with Egypt. If you remember, I said that the aid was coming in. It was coming through Egypt, coming down here to Nitzana to be checked by Israel, and then was traveling back up. Just in this corner over here, the southern tip of the Gaza Strip is Kerem Shalom, right? What is Kerem Shalom? Kerem Shalom is one of the passage points from Israel into the Gaza Strip. There used to be a point also in the north, the Erez crossing. These crossings were attacked during and destroyed during the October 7 massacre by the terrorists. Israel had to pay for itself to rehabilitate and to reestablish and to rebuild these crossing points. And it's now through these crossing points that much of the aid is going in through Kerem Shalom into the Gaza Strip and then being spread out. So that's just a basic idea. At the moment, pretty much this area where I'm showing you now is the last area that's left by the sea that is not occupied by Israeli forces. About 70% of the Gaza Strip is already under operational control of Israel and the IDF. And now we're operating to do, obviously, to make that last push. Now, the aid going into Gaza, this has to be understood. Once the decision was made that we would allow the aid in, that then became something which we did systematically. And since the beginning of the war, pretty much since, not since the 7th, obviously there were a few days of fighting, there were a few days of discussions as to whether aid should go into the Gaza Strip. Since the 21st of October 2023, that's the aid that has gone into the Gaza Strip through the international mechanisms. 1.9 million tons of aid that has gone into the Gaza Strip, 1.5 million of that being foodstuffs. Basically, we've seen the Gaza Strip flooded with food that should be enough to survive for long periods of time. We've seen 4 very, very specific and very, very different times during that full period. We saw the period of October 7 or October 21 when the aid starts flowing through to January 2025, right? That's that first period of the war when there were periodic ceasefires, there were periodic moves when the aid went up and down, but predominantly the aid was flowing into the Gaza Strip without much disruption. Then we had, on the 19th of February this year, the start of that process of the last hostage release, where Israel agreed to allow some 600 trucks to go into Gaza every single day. And there were really 4,200 trucks of goods and food and everything going into Gaza. This should have been enough food and provisions for many, many months forward. And that process went on for 2 months, right? If you remember, all the way through, Israel provided, and I showed it on the previous slide, hundreds of thousands of tons of food and other aid, specifically during that last period. Excuse me, I apologize. Specifically in the understanding that we didn't know where really Hamas was going. Our assumption was that Hamas would renege on the deal at one stage, and we would find ourselves again in a situation where we were going back to war. And part of that preparation was to ensure that the Gaza Strip was at the time flooded with aid. Then we had the 2-month period where there was no aid. Hamas pulled out of the hostage deal, refused to carry on, refused to enjoy the aid that was being provided to the Gazan people. And again, instead of choosing life as they did on October 7, they chose death. That was their positive choice. And so we had that 2-month period where really nothing was going into the Gaza Strip, and what was being consumed was what all the foodstuffs that had been accumulated over that previous period. During that time, we then see a number of different movements, right? We see again discussions in Qatar. Maybe we can come up with a new hostage deal. I believe that those discussions were a failure from the start. Hamas never intended to come to any deal, and we saw that from their end game. The Qataris knew it, and so the Qataris and Hamas during this period, hand in hand together, let there be no disillusions. The Qataris are not honest brokers. They are not a neutral party. They host the Hamas leadership. They are part of the Muslim Brotherhood. They present and promote the Muslim Brotherhood, which is Hamas. Qatar is our enemy for all intents and purposes, and that must be understood. But they are playing this role as the negotiator, as the arbiter. So we're stuck with them. So during this period, they're pulling us. They're pulling the Americans by the nose. They're pulling us by the nose, trying to get as many concessions as possible in the knowledge that they weren't going to agree to anything. And they get ready to launch this starvation campaign. That is all then bought. That is all then prepared. Let's not be naive to think that one day someone woke up in Gaza and said, well, you know what? Let's talk about starvation in Gaza. That is unfortunately not the case. This was a planned, well-funded, and well-timed, really not only media campaign, but really perception warfare at its very highest degree. We then come to the end of that period. If you remember, just at the end of mid-May, Eden Alexander was released by the terrorists as a show of good faith to President Trump. And at the same time, Israel has understood that there's something wrong with the aid. Now, I have to say that personally, I tried to persuade as many people as possible, together with the rest of the Jerusalem Center for Security and Foreign Affairs and other actors like the IDSF, the Bitonistim. We tried to persuade the government that at no stage should the aid going into the Gaza Strip be given out by the UN. The UN, similar to Hamas, similar to Qatar, is our enemy. The UN is not neutral. It doesn't play a neutral function. It is there to support Hamas, enable Hamas, and to promote Hamas. I don't say that lightly, but I'll explain a little bit as we go along. So at the same time as the Qataris are planning and Hamas are planning their starvation campaign, Israel and the US are working on a different option. It's called the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. The Gaza Humanitarian Foundation starts working on the 26th of May, 2025, and I'll talk about them in just a second. And really, since then, Israel renewed the flow of aid going into the Gaza Strip, and there has been, just in the 2-month period, a massive amount of aid, 2.5-month period, a massive amount of aid that's gone in through Israel into the Gaza Strip, ready for the UN distribution mechanism. Now, let's just remember who we're talking about with the UN, right? What you can see on your screen is on the left-hand side of the screen with the UN symbol. This is the headquarters of UNRWA, the dominant UN organization in the Gaza Strip. And on the right-hand side is the server farm, Hamas's server farm that was placed and really was built underneath the UNRWA headquarters. You can see the electricity lines going down. You can see water lines going down. There's no way that UNRWA could have said, we didn't know this was happening. They knew it was happening. UNRWA is infiltrated with terrorists. It's infested with terrorists. And so you have this UN mechanism that really is so more connected to Hamas than anything else, has no idea or perception of what exactly neutrality is. And they are the ones that the world now expects to give out the aid. And so when you look at what they say, what the UN itself says, here we have a report from UN Ops for June 2025. And this was really the understanding all the way through the war. What's happening with the aid that goes into the Gaza Strip? It's predominantly being stolen by Hamas, right? Look at the numbers. You can see how much is being collected. 1,090 trucks that had been collected. Of them, 1,043 were intercepted, right? Either taken by Hamas or by the Gazans. So we have a huge amount of aid that's going in. Hamas is stealing the aid. Hamas, over the period of the war, has made anything between $500 million to $1 billion selling the aid that they received for free at exorbitant prices to the Gazan people. Why is there possibly Gazan people who are feeling hungry, possibly even reaching starvation? It's because Hamas has stolen the aid, stolen from the UN, which didn't really put up very much of a fight, has stolen the aid and is now selling it to the highest bidder. The UN, I don't know how many of you saw, there was recently a press conference given by the UN spokesman, and a journalist asked him, well, Israel has offered to provide security for the movement of the UN trucks. Why don't you take that? And he said, oh, no, we can't do that. Of course, that would be a no-no. We prefer to have Hamas policemen, so he answered, that have been provided with walkie-talkies by Israel in order to coordinate. Well, in what world is that a reality where the UN, ostensibly neutral, which they're not, rejects safe passage from Israel to provide aid to the population, and instead says, no, we want to go with Hamas. All these reports are on the internet, by the way. You can go into UN Ops and see them. They've actually just changed, having understood really the train wreck that is these reports. They've changed the format just over the last few days. So, but I mean, you can still find how many trucks were collected, how many trucks were intercepted. The Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. The Gaza Humanitarian Foundation is a disaster for the UN, and it's a disaster for Hamas. What is the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation? The Gaza Humanitarian Foundation was set up by the US together with Israel. The modus operandi is very simple. Set up distribution sites where Gazan people will be able to come and receive aid directly into their hands. You cut out the UN middleman, you cut out the Hamas middleman, and the people who need to get the aid actually get it directly into their hands without having to pay exorbitant prices. I mean, what a revolutionary idea. Not. It should have been the basic provisions of what was happening until then. But again, the UN allowed the aid to be hijacked, to be intercepted, was happy supporting Hamas and making sure that Hamas had the food to keep on fighting Israel, had the food to keep on selling to the Gazan population, and in order to keep on bringing in revenues to pay their fighters. And so that whole system was really, for Hamas, it was a disaster, which is why when you've seen these distribution sites, you hear gunfire in the back. The claim is obviously that it's Israel shooting at them. It's not Israel shooting at them. I think maybe in the first 2 days when the Israeli soldiers didn't exactly know how to digest the situation, there were some incidents of confusion. But now the working has been really become a standard practice. The firing, the shooting that you're hearing is either background fighting that is still going on in the Gaza Strip, or the Hamas terrorists waiting for the Gazan civilians to come out of these distribution areas, and then they're shooting at them to steal their food. That's predominantly what you're hearing in the background when you hear the shooting. So Hamas is annoyed with them, and they're trying to undermine them at any and every given stage. If you followed the last discussions in Qatar, one of the Hamas's demands was to disband the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. Like, why would you demand to disband an organization that is feeding your population for free? No price, all free, straight into their hands. Why? What would be Hamas's interest to have it dismantled? And the answer is simple: because they don't gain as much financially or from a governance point of view from the aid going directly into the hands of the Gazan people. They lose money, they lose status, they lose all of their control of the Gazan people. And the UN the same. The UN has been exposed as being ineffective, incapable of ensuring that the aid gets to the Gazan people. And so the UN are annoyed. Well, obviously, this the distribution of aid breaches humanitarian principles, they say. Well, what exact humanitarian principles are being breached when you're delivering aid directly into the hands of the people who need it, directly into the mouths of the Gazan people who actually need it, and not via the genocidal terrorists? So all of those actors are unfortunately not very happy, and here's why. Since the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation started functioning on the 26th of May, really just over 2.5 months ago, they've delivered more than 115 million meals straight to those in need, straight to the people who actually need the food. 1.5 million meals, which is basically a meal a day for every single Gazan, and that is happening every single day. This is, of course, only in 3 distribution sites. It's just 3 distribution sites, as I'll explain in a second. There is still massive amounts of additional aid that is going into the Gaza Strip via the UN mechanisms. Now, if you look at where these 3 distribution sites are, if you remember, the Saudi neighborhood is part of that southern area of the Gaza Strip. That's in Rafah. Then you have Khan Yunis, just a little bit further north along the coast. And then you have Wadi Gaza. Remember, I pointed out to you just at the top of the words Gaza Strip, in the middle of the Gaza Strip. So if the whole Gaza Strip is 41 kilometers in length, you've got a distribution site pretty much just about in the middle, and two distribution sites in the south where most of the or many of the Gazan people have now gathered in that area by the sea that's called the Muwasi. And you're seeing the food being delivered directly into their hands. The Gaza Humanitarian Foundation is planning to expand its operations. It could have done so previously had it not been for the objections of the UN, had it not been for the rejection of Hamas. And so these operations, which, let's put it again on the table, none of these operations, not the entry of 1.9 million tons of aid and not the operations of the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, could happen without Israel's agreement. Israel is operating on the ground. Israel has forces operating, has tanks operating, has soldiers operating, has engineering corps operating, blowing up the hundreds of kilometers of Hamas tunnels. We have planes attacking from the air. So no one's going to be operating there without Israel's permission. And all of these actors are there with Israel's permission. And nonetheless, what do you see? You see that. You see the front page, excuse me. You see the front page of the New York Times pushing this fake lie that little Muhammad al-Matuk is suffering from starvation, right? They found a mother with their child. He looks like skin and bones. Obviously, it's starvation. No, it's not. It's cerebral palsy. We're very sorry for little Muhammad, but it's not starvation that you're seeing in the picture. Look at his brother on the right-hand side of the picture. That is his brother. Let's not say he's overly fed, but he's not starving and he's not skin and bones like his very sick younger brother. Now, look at most of the pictures that you're seeing coming out of the Gaza Strip. It's children. Children are starving to death. Now, I don't know how many of you are parents. I would hope a lot. And those of you that aren't yet, I can only wish you that blessing of becoming a parent. And suddenly you realize, well, when you're in a situation where there's no food around and you have to choose whether you're going to eat first or are you going to feed your child, I think that the natural human response is that the parent will give up food for their child. That's something that you're apparently not seeing in the Gaza Strip. Apparently in the Gaza Strip, so Qatar and Hamas would have us believe, even the parents of the children that are starving don't worry about their children because they're looking pretty well fed, they're looking pretty well sustained, but their children are starving. It's incredible. It's an incredible reality, falsehood that the New York Times is trying to sell us. And now let's not be mistaken. I work a little bit in that world of media as well. You don't get front page coverage like that on the New York Times for a penny, and not even for a pound. This is something which journalists are paid to promote, paid to push, and it costs a lot of money to get that type of a campaign to that level of exposure. Front pages of newspapers, all telling an absolute lie, and they know it. They know that they are telling a lie, and yet they'll do it anyway. Why? It's money. You get coverage, you get sales, you get whatever you get in for running the story in the first place. And this is what they are selling. They're selling that lie of Gazans starving to death, even though there's plenty of food in the Gaza Strip. Is everyone obese? Can they walk into the local McDonald's and say, let's have the oversize? Absolutely not. And that shouldn't be the situation either. It is nonetheless a war zone. But between that and abject starvation and children dying because they don't have food to put in their mouth is an absolute lie. Obviously, once we had this whole campaign come out, I'll tell you another little inside story from these discussions. Israel's government has a dilemma, right? On the one hand, we are interested And that has been our goal all the time, to ensure that Gaza doesn't suffer, that the civilians don't suffer, that we fight Hamas. And we've been providing the aid of all different kinds. On the other hand, because of the discussion in Israel and really the substantial objection of many of the Israeli population to providing aid to the same people that our brothers, sisters, children are fighting, that's just outrageous. So Israel's government hasn't really told much of the population what exactly is going on, how much aid is going on, how much we're doing. And that's why you see only after the starvation story and propaganda comes along do we hear that another picture of another kid who was allegedly starving had actually been taken out of Gaza with the help of Israel, flown to Italy in order to receive medical treatment. Now, so why didn't you tell us this before? Why isn't Israel telling this to the world, how much aid we've let in? How is it that we were able, really like that, at the flip of a switch, to go and come along and say, well, you know what? At the Kerem Shalom crossing, there's 925 truckloads of aid waiting for the UN to come and take into the Gaza Strip. The UN needed to be shamed into doing that, because over the last few days, they've been picking up anywhere between 200 and 260 trucks of aid, taking them off. Many of them have been intercepted, obviously. But they've now really started whittling down that mountain of aid that they had neglected. They had refused to take the aid because of the functioning of the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. And suddenly they were embarrassed. And so now they have suddenly been able to do it. But I ask you, well, why didn't Israel say that there was all that aid in the Gaza Strip before and embarrass the UN before? That is what we should have been doing. We should have been calling them out from day one, saying, this is the mountain of aid that is building up. We should have been able to see and anticipate this perception warfare, this propaganda warfare from Hamas, from Qatar, from the UN. Unfortunately, we didn't. And so we walked into another nightmare of propaganda around the world and lies around the world. But that's where we are today. There is a substantial amount of food that's going into the Gaza Strip via the UN mechanisms. And that aid, whether it's being intercepted or not intercepted, is getting to some of the Gazan population. We have the functioning of the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, which is not part of that 1.9 million tons of aid, but rather separate additional aid that's going into the Gaza Strip. And yet, irrelevant of the facts and irrespective of the facts, we're still being accused of starvation, because when it comes to Gaza and Israel, the truth simply doesn't matter. It's all about perception warfare. It's all about what the terrorists want the world to believe, and sadly, how willingly the world is to go along with that terror narrative, whether it be the UN organizations or the international media, pushed forward, obviously, by Al Jazeera, which is, as we know, Qatari. So that's really the salad that we're in. And that, for me, I think presents the relevant factors. Back to you, Gary. Gary, you're on mute.
Gary, you're on mute.
Oh, my apologies to everyone. I'm going to ask the first question myself, and while I'm doing that, if others could raise their hands, please, so I can call others to ask questions. My question is, I'm curious to know, to what extent do you think that the Gazan population support Hamas? My view is that back in October the 7th, they pretty well unanimously supported Hamas. Indeed, probably so much so that they supported Hamas more than the German population supported the Nazis in the Second World War. You know, there was always the stories in World War II of the occasional good German who helped Jews. I haven't heard any stories of any good Gazans who actually tried to help hostages. And while people are saying, oh, no, the Gazans are not supporting Hamas that much, to the extent that's reduced, it's only because Hamas are losing. Would you agree with me, or do you think there are other factors at work?
So I've got to make the story even worse for you, Gary, if I may.
Please.
If you remember, already back in September last year, Prime Minister Netanyahu offered a $5 million reward and free passage to anywhere in the world to any Gazan that bought out a hostage or that gave us information regarding the hostages. To this day, 10 months later, we have zero takers, zero, not one. We're talking about getting out of a war zone where you're starving to death, receiving millions of dollars to become actually rich and to get out of that demolition site. And unfortunately, not one taker. It's just an unbelievable reality. To what extent do they support Hamas? It's hard to tell. We know that from surveys before the war, Hamas enjoyed greater support than Fatah, than Mahmoud Abbas, in both in Gaza and in Judea and Samaria. It's hard to tell the extent of the support today, because in the absence of really any clear survey, there was a survey that was just published recently by the Palestinian Center for Policy and Survey Research, which did still show a high level of Gazan support for Hamas, despite everything, despite the war, despite the destruction, despite the death, more than for Fatah or any other party. To say that it's all of the Gazans, I'm not. I don't think that it's true. I don't believe that is true. There is tremendous support. Not everyone, maybe a majority, or certainly a majority, but not, I believe, not a big majority. But we've also seen, and this also has to be said, there have been other Gazans standing up and saying there is an alternative. We had the Abu Shabab clan standing up and saying they're criminals. Let's be honest about it. They're organized crime, just in a different fashion. And they are standing up and saying we will be an alternative to Hamas. They have obviously their own motivations, their own goals, and then you need to ask yourself, well, is drug trafficking and collecting protection better than Jews being slaughtered by the genocidal terrorists? So it's really choosing between two not or one disastrous option and one not great option, to say the least. But there are alternatives, and some of them have stood up. On the other hand, we've seen I don't know how many people saw the response of Shlomi Ziv, one of the hostages who was released. He responded today to the posts criticizing Israel about for killing the terrorist, the Al Jazeera terrorist, Anas Abu Sharif, and he responded saying, "Well, I was held in captive by the family of a journalist and whose father was a doctor." These were the people who are holding our hostages after October 7. Unfortunately, there isn't. I would like to believe that there is a more decent Gazan population, but much of the facts don't really support that suggestion.
Thank you, Maurice. Sylvia Lewin, would you like to come off mute, please, and ask your question? And if possible,
It's actually David Lewin, not Sylvia, but there you are. I understand that you are a military background and not a government background. We every now and again have Israeli military spokesmen on our television sets giving various explanations. Why have they never taken the opportunity in all this time to say exactly what you're saying? I mean, I accept that for some reason the government doesn't say so, but the military should.
Thank you, Maurice.
Well, so it's like I explained, the government, the military, everyone in Israel is trying to maintain the balance between providing the aid and providing what's necessary and not infuriating the Israeli population. That the same military that we expect to tell the world, well, look how much aid we're providing to the Gaza Strips, is the same military that's calling us all in for reserve duty and calling hundreds of thousands of people to come and risk their lives for the country as part of that military. And it's a difficulty. How do you expect people to come and fight when you say, well, you come and fight, but on the other hand, we're also supporting our enemies, because the aid does go to support Hamas. So we're in a sort of a catch-22 situation, and on the one hand, and on the other hand, it's just a bad policy. We're really shooting ourselves in the foot. We're doing all of the good work. We're evacuating children for medical assistance in Italy, and yet we're still getting slaughtered because we're not talking about it. In Hebrew, there's a saying, "Asita velo pirsamta lo asita klum." If you did something and you didn't publicize it, it's as if you've done nothing. And unfortunately, that's the reality. We need to talk about all of the good things that Israel's doing, all of the medical evacuations, all of the aid that we're providing. It's hard to hear, but we're hearing it anyway, but only in response to a media campaign against us.
Thank you very much. Malcolm Shafron, and could others please ask questions as well? Malcolm. You're on mute, Malcolm.
You're muted.
Okay, well, waiting for... Oh, here he is. Malcolm.
Sorry. Yes, sorry. Yeah, very interested in this. Just a question in two parts, really. All the aid that is going in, is that being supplied by Israel from Israeli companies? And the other part of the question is, if that is true, why are there organisations like Leket who appeal for food for Israel? So, I don't know whether... Well, I'll let you answer that one, because it's a bit confusing for me. If we're supplying the food, why aren't we supplying our own people first?
So I'll give you two answers to that. The international aid that's going through the UN organizations is not coming from Israel. It's not coming from the Israeli population. It's not coming from the Israeli government. It's coming from donations from around the world that come specifically for the purpose of aid to Gaza. So that, let's put that aside. The Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, on the other hand, is buying for basically at full mark. I won't say full a retail cost, obviously, but at full market cost, goods from Israel. It's cheaper than importing it from anywhere else, which is why you've seen these pictures of Israeli goods in the food packages that the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation is giving out. That's not something that's being donated by Israel. Israel is not providing that aid. It's facilitating the aid and allowing it to go in through Israel and obviously in an expedited manner. And Leket, let's please, if I may, put Leket out of the equation. Leket, I have to say, is one of these truly amazing organizations that goes along and collects, helps farmers collect food that would otherwise rot in the fields. If you're coming to Israel, I would strongly suggest contacting Leket and doing one of those special picking days. Leket is a whole different other story. They're doing phenomenal work as opposed to the terrorists and the UN.
Thank you. Before I ask Richard and Susan...
And no, I don't work for Leket or get any profits from them.
Okay. Before I ask Richard and Susan to ask their questions, I've got a small follow-up on what you just said about the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. You mentioned that there were 3 sites at the moment. I heard US Ambassador to Israel, Mike Huckabee, say this was going to be expanded to 16 sites. Number one, is that possible? Number two, assuming it is possible, can we actually then say goodbye, United Nations, there's no need for you? Because the amount of aid will be colossal if Huckabee is right.
So the answer is yes. Obviously, we can expand it and we can make the distribution centers in many more different areas in the north of Gaza by the Zikim area, and which can also provide a solution. Some more in the central areas, and so there definitely is space for more distribution centers that would obviously be able to pick up on the distribution and increase the distribution. I would love to be able to say that Israel will one day grow the backbone that it needs to in order to throw the really hostile enemy UN organizations out. They are nothing of the solution, and all of the problem together with the terrorists. I've written about that extensively. It's probably a lecture within and of itself, Israel's relations with the UN. If you look up Maurice Hirsch, Israel, UN relations, you'll find an hour-long talk that I gave on the subject.
Who was that?
And you can go through it there.
I know.
Okay, can I ask
Don't-
Richard
allow them
Afton
in.
to ask his question, please? Richard.
Yeah,
Okay.
hi, good evening, everybody, and Maurice, and thank you very much. But, you know, I'm long enough in the tooth to have witnessed some horrendous failures of Israeli PR over the years. What you're saying about Jew hatred is absolutely right. But, you know, we've got a situation in which the IDF is in control of Gaza, so we're told. But Hamas are still issuing diktats internationally, left, right, and centre, and they're still controlling the PR scene as well. If what you say is absolutely right, and I don't have any way of not agreeing or believing what you're saying, why is Israel once again not getting its message over?
So firstly, Hamas. Let's understand Hamas, what it is. Hamas isn't only Hamas in Gaza. There's Hamas in Judea and Samaria as well. There's Hamas all the way around the world. There's the Hamas leadership that's sitting in Qatar. You have people like Zair Jabarin, who's running around the world with all of his friends. Jihad Yajmur sitting there in Turkey. There are enough Hamas terrorists around the world that are capable. Khalil al-Qayad that we hear talking so much, Khaled Mashal, all of these people who we hear that are capable of running this Hamas propaganda campaign without any connection to what's going on the ground in the Gaza Strip. Obviously, there is some form of coordination between them, but us practically and getting very much to the point where we've destroyed Hamas in the Gaza Strip doesn't prevent the rest of Hamas from operating internationally. That's the answer. And unfortunately, we do see these things coming along. We do hear them coming along. And every time we fall into that same pitfall of believing that there has to be a minimum standard, even of journalism for the New York Times. And every time they succeed to surprise us. They run a story which they know is not true, that they know they're going to be hammered for, that they know they're going to have to put out a correction. And they did put out a correction. 3 days later, it was this big on the 18th page of the newspaper. I'm giving that as an example. I don't really know what page it was on. But it was worth it for them. And so when it's financially worthwhile, it's propaganda worthwhile to tell a lie, as the old adage says, a lie gets half the way around the world before the truth can put its boots on. That's what we're dealing with. We're dealing with one side, Israel, who tries to uphold the law, provide our enemies with even with sustenance that we know is supporting their war effort, trying to do the best that we can in order to defend our people, and the other side, who are genocidal terrorists, pathological liars, who are all interested just in perception warfare and really KGB style disinformation, misinformation campaigns, and the world media just lapping it up. So the BBC, I'm sure many of you saw and would remember the great work done by David Collier, taking apart an entire BBC documentary that in hindsight turned out to be an interview with the son of a senior Hamas operative. What are you people, stupid? Do you not understand what is going on? And the answer is yes, they do. They understand it and they don't care.
Are you saying, so sorry, Gary, just a supplementary question.
Right.
Maurice, are you saying that the likes of David Lammy, our Foreign Secretary, Oxford educated lawyer, and Sir Keir Starmer himself, a very eloquent criminal lawyer, are you saying that they don't understand and appreciate what's going on?
No, absolutely not. They understand fully well what's going on. They know exactly the situation. They have more information than everyone else. They just don't care. They are politicians They are playing to their electorate. They believe that what they will doing, and let's not misunderstand or underestimate politicians. Their one entire goal in life is to get re-elected. They don't care about what they're doing for the country. They don't care about whether it's promoting the country or not. Keir Starmer's going up for the party conference. Who knows whether it'll survive or not? And suddenly he's recognizing Palestine as a state. Does he think that we're all stupid? The French President Macron almost lost the last elections, and suddenly he's recognizing the state of Palestine. Well, what exactly is going on there? We understand perfectly well. They're playing to what they believe is a supportive electorate, and it doesn't matter if they. I apologize for this being too blunt as well. It doesn't matter if they throw a few Jews or a few million Jews under the bus, promote and support the anti-Semitism in the UK and everywhere else. All their goal is to be re-elected, and that's what they're doing.
Thank you. Susan Block. Susan, please come off mute.
Well, actually, it's also my husband is going to say something.
Okay.
There's two of us. Can we have two questions, please? There have been reports about people, Gazans, being killed whilst queuing for food. And what we hear on the news is that the IDF have fired warning shots and are looking into their fatalities. But we haven't heard anything more about that. So it would be good to hear what has actually happened and how the people were killed and what information there's been. The second question we have is whether it is possible to bring in further supplies of aid through Egypt and the southern Gazan crossing points.
Okay, so the first question I addressed as we were going along at the distribution sites. The initial period was really accompanied by a great deal of uncertainty as to what's going on, how many people are coming, and there were instances where IDF soldiers needed to fire warning shots. What you've seen since then is not IDF soldiers shooting, as has been claimed, innocent Gazans taking food. Why would we bring them to give them food? And if we were going to shoot, this is that whole genocide argument. Well, if we're going to shoot the Gazans coming to take food, well, why don't we have massive tanks standing in a line to blow all of these people up, right? That argument simply doesn't hold any water, any logical water whatsoever. We're either the most incompetent army in the world, or we're being accused of a lie, and I believe that it is the latter. So that's what's going on there. What you're hearing in the background noises is shooting around from active war zones, or Hamas terrorists shooting at the Gazans in order to steal the aid that they've just received for free. As regards Egypt, let me, without being too unpolitically correct, as regard our Egyptian partners in peace, just think about this question. Where do you think the Gazans got all of their ammunition from, all of their weaponry from, all of the machinery that they needed to dig a tunnel system greater than the London Underground? It didn't come through Israel. It didn't come through the sea. It leaves one option, Egypt. Egypt is a problem. That is why we never agreed, even from the beginning of the war, to allow aid to go directly in from Egypt. It would have gone in with weapons. It would have gone in with explosive. It would have gone in with everything that Hamas needed to continue fighting. And so the Egyptian option is not a good option. It will not provide more aid to the Gazans, but it will certainly provide more fuel, more ammunition, and more drive for Hamas.
Thank you. Joanne Schiffer. Joanne, if you could turn your camera on, that would be lovely.
Is that better?
Yes.
Hi. My question is regarding our wonderful leaders in the West here. What should Israel's response be? I assume Israel will have a coordinated response to all those countries France, the UK, Canada, Australia, who are recognizing a Palestinian state. Goodness knows what state it is, but we understand the reasons. But what should Israel's response be?
So just on your last part of your question, I'll plug again, unfortunately, with no sense of any type of modesty whatsoever. If you look on the website of the Jerusalem Center for Security and Foreign Affairs, this morning I published an article about what will this state of Palestine look like. It'll be a dictatorship with a failed economy that is the most anti-Semitic, Jew-hating country in the world. And that's what it's going to look like. There are no questions about it. It's not, well, maybe that's what it will be. That's what it will be. As regards the response to the recognition of Palestine, I think that every single country needs its own specific response. For example, to France, France has a consulate in Jerusalem as opposed to its embassy in Tel Aviv, similar to the situation that we had with the US. Until 2018. I believe that Israel should order the immediate closure of that consulate, of the French consulate in Jerusalem. It serves only the Palestinians, and if they want to be the Palestinians, don't enjoy the services of the King David Hotel, where they sit right next to it. Go and enjoy the streets of Ramallah. If you want to be with the Palestinians, go with the Palestinians. Gesundheit, we don't need you. There has already been a suggestion that Israel and here this is obviously not a small danger also for the Jewish community in England, that Israel will stop providing MI6 with intelligence about active terrorists, which is something that we do on a regular basis. Every country needs to meet its exact answer, and so that I believe the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the Prime Minister are coming up with that answer for really tailoring it to each country as we go along. And so that I'm sure we'll see being played out. What I have suggested is that a legislation be passed in the Knesset that says that once this recognition comes into force, it should immediately bring about the abolition of the Oslo Accords, the dismantling of the Palestinian Authority, and the application of Israel's laws to Judea and Samaria. If you want a state, you can have it in Gaza, somewhere down the line, but you're not going to have one in Judea and Samaria, and we don't care what the French say about it, or Anthony Albanese. He is irrelevant.
Right, before I ask Mark Harrington to ask his question, I just wanted to say that with regard to Britain, there is the issue of the supplies by Israel to our National Health Service. Something like 200 million prescriptions every year rely on Teva and other Israeli pharmaceutical companies. If they were to stop, Benjamin Netanyahu has it in his hands to pretty well cause massive damage to our NHS. Is that on the table?
Does the NHS still exist?
That's a debatable point.
I don't think so. I can't believe that Prime Minister Netanyahu would do anything, or any other prime minister for that matter, would do anything that would cause the population of Great Britain to suffer, and really to prevent them from getting necessary medicines. I think the answer will be diplomatic. The answer will be in that realms of state to state and not state to people.
Okay, thank you. Mark Harrington.
Hello. I just want to enhance the discussion that we've had about recognition of a Palestinian state by the UK. Just like to remind everyone how many Jews there are. There's 250,000 Jews in the UK approximately, and how many Muslims there are. About 5-6 million. So there's no way that we're ever going to stop the recognition of a Palestinian state in the UK. It's just a voting number, and that's all we have to consider, and that's all they'll consider.
Maurice, what do you think?
What Keir Starmer and what Lammy are going to suddenly realize is that their recognition really is empty of any value whatsoever. If you remember already back last year, when the Palestinians came up with their last effort to get recognition in the UN, Great Britain and France on the Security Council voted in favor of recognizing the state of Palestine. It didn't feed the appetite or satiate the appetite of the Israel haters. And this move to recognize the non-existent state of Palestine will similarly not satiate the beast. And they will find themselves again looking for more and more steps to try and placate the ever radicalized electorate, unfortunately. And they will soon realize that there is nothing, they don't have enough to give to feed this beast, and they will forever be found wanting.
Thank you. Anne Barnett. Anne, you're on mute. Can you come? Ah, good.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I wondered, it's clear that our airwaves and our information is coming in the West is coming mostly from Hamas. Do you not think that that Israel would benefit by allowing Western journalists into Gaza so that maybe some of them could tell us what is actually going on, with the exception of Jeremy Bowen, maybe?
So here we're in not a small dilemma. What do we do with these journalists going in? Do we allow them in so that they can tell the real story on the assumption that they will actually tell the real story? I don't buy into that theory in the first place. Journalists come to tell a story that they think will sell or promote themselves and promote the channel stations, newspapers that they work for. Jew hatred is a good seller. Palestinian victimhood at the hands of the evil Hun Jew sells good newspapers and brings ratings. And so I don't in any way subscribe to that, really that fallacy that's being pushed by Piers Morgan, that as if, well, all the international journalists that will suddenly go into the Gaza Strip will suddenly become honest and will be telling the true story. It's just not the reality on the one hand. On the other hand, they will certainly become mouthpieces for Hamas. That's what you have organizers. You have the people who set up the interviews. You have the bookers. That's an entire profession in and of itself. And so who's going to be doing the booking? The Hamas people take them to see the Hamas sites that they want them to see, and nothing of the real story. And so that in and of itself is just bad. On the third hand, as part of that a really great octopus, the journalists will certainly be used as human shields. Hamas doesn't care about its children. Hamas is happy to see, as Ismail Haniyeh said, we need the blood of our children in order to motivate the terrorists to keep on going. They certainly wouldn't care about the journalists. They would soon become cannon fodder, human shields for Hamas. And again, Israel would be vilified for killing journalists when really what we're doing is we're attacking Hamas sites that are being defended by the journalists. So it's not a small decision. And there are different sides to it, but I don't believe that there is any justification to allow them in.
Barry Epstein, please come off mute. Barry.
Thank you, Gary. Gary, you have illustrated tonight why people should be, all Jews in this country should be a member of the NGA, because as I said when I last spoke, Gary, we do need some more starker Jews who go out there and sock it to them, and they do this cogently. My question to the Lieutenant Colonel is this. Obviously, he's a distinguished military man. Love him or hate him, the Prime Minister of Israel was also a distinguished military man. Distinguished military persons will have weighed up 8.5 million against possibly 20 to 50 hostages who have not been released. Why don't the Israelis, and I have skin in the game here, I have a niece in Israel and grandnephews in Israel, why don't the IDF, and this will make listeners cringe, go in and finish the job with the possibility that Hamas, as part of that, will murder the remaining hostages?
Interesting question, Maurice.
I have to say this is a dilemma that I don't think that there's anyone on the face of the earth that would want to that would want to be faced with this dilemma. How can we, on the one hand, how can you say that we are willingly going to conduct operations that will bring about the murder of hostages that have now survived for 675 days in this in the Hamas dungeons? And when we can possibly get them back, and they can possibly at some stage return to some type of normal life, if that's even possible after going through such an ordeal, and as many people as we can get back alive, that really, Barry, is possibly what distinguishes between us and Hamas. They sanctify death, and we sanctify life. We're willing to even have Israeli soldiers, unfortunately, and again, I'll present the other side in a second, go and fight and potentially be killed in order to try and save a few lives. We're willing to give up and release mass murderers who we know will certainly go and murder again in order to sanctify a life, as the Talmud teaches us. Anyone who saves a life, it's as if he saved the entire world. And so that's on the one hand. And on the other hand, what does it mean? We've lost 50 soldiers just in the last 2 months, trying to go and get 23, possibly only 20 live hostages back. We're paying a price which is exorbitant in comparison to the lives that we can possibly save. And if you want to save a life, save the life of the Israeli soldiers, and possibly double the Israeli soldiers or 3 times the Israeli soldiers, and just go in, as you suggested, tanks blazing, artillery accompaniment, really all of our forces mobilized from the air, from the sea, from the land, and just crush these terrorists and end it once and for all. And I believe that what we're trying to do is exhaust every other possible option before we have to make that decision that could possibly cause the terrorists to murder the hostages. And as I said, it's a decision that I wouldn't believe that there is anyone on planet Earth that would have to face that dilemma.
Thank you. Sarah Roberts. Sarah, come off mute. Lovely.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, good evening. I guess firstly, I'm a non-Jew, and I joined my Leeds against anti-Semitism after October the 7th. So I just want to be educated on how I can speak to my friends. You mentioned during your talk about in history, during wars, people are not expected to give aid to other countries, such as during World War II, we didn't give aid to the Germans, which I fully agree with. When my neutral friends who haven't decided say, well, this war is different because Hamas is a terrorist organization, how would I answer that? Because I see the difference, because when people refer to it as a conflict, it's not a conflict, it's a war. But what answer can I, do you understand my question?
Yes, without question.
Yeah.
I understand, Sarah. And really, I would suggest a few different options. Yes, Hamas is a terrorist organization. We all agree with that. The problem is, what type of a terrorist organization is it? We, from a Western point of view, believe that they are a genocidal terrorist organization because they carry out terrorist attacks, because they murder innocent people, because they carry out suicide bombings and bomb hospitals and restaurants and buses and really anything along the way, just in order to murder as many people as possible. That's how we see them, and that's how we should understand them. But the other side of the coin, and this is what I suggest could possibly be the answer, how do the Palestinians see them? The Palestinians see them as a legitimate Palestinian faction. They enjoy the support, as I presented earlier in the talk in response to one of the questions from, I think, from Gary. They enjoy the support still to this day of most of the Gazan people, according to studies carried out by Palestinian public research, market research companies. And they were, at the end of the day, they were democratically elected as the representatives of the Palestinian people in 2006, which was when the last elections took place in the Palestinian Authority. So we may see them as a terrorists. The Palestinians see them as their leadership, as their representatives, that they support to this day. If you remember, soon after the October 7 massacre, there was a series of reports that came out showing that most of the population of the Palestinians, 80%, supported the October 7 massacre. That is that, and this isn't numbers that Israel's coming up with. This is market research conducted by Palestinian institutions, asking Palestinians, well, what do you think? So the second part of that answer is, I would suggest that tell your friends that they believe when the Palestinians say, when the Gazans say, when the Hamas says, our goal is to murder Jews, just believe them. Just believe them. You cannot say, well, they're children. Well, they're just terrorists. Just believe them. They say what they mean and mean what they say.
Yeah, okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Two more questions. Edward Moss and then Ayala Graham. Edward.
Can you hear me now? Yes, all right?
Yes, yes.
Hello, good evening, everybody. Yes, it's just to return to a small thing, actually, that we as a community have an awful habit of living on the end of the pier, yet constantly missing the boat. And there's something I've always wondered about, that we're talking about Palestine, the recognition of Palestine, etc., or Narnia, as some of us advocates refer to it. And I've often wondered, and I've put these questions in the chat, which I'll push the button afterwards, why aren't people who are interviewed in the media, or anybody goes on television programs or anything like that, particularly when it's live, when they start mentioning Palestine, jump in with the basic questions that we all know they can't answer? I mean, I've been an advocate now for some 15 years, particularly it goes back to the Kedem shop here in Manchester, where we all went out there to counter a very ignorant group of people who, one in particular, said that the IDF were stopping Palestinians fishing in the Palestinian Sea. They meant the Dead Sea. You can't get more stupid than that. But I'm just wondering why we aren't jumping in with these basic questions we have. For instance, asking, well, you said Palestine, madam or sir, where's its borders? What's its capital? Who are it past 3 presidents? And just hit them with these questions straight away and not give them a minute. I don't understand why we're not doing that, because it's just something I ask, and in the 15 years I've probably asked, I don't know how many people, including the likes of Jeremy Corbyn and Planck Bergen and all these people. I've asked them and nobody has ever responded, which to me is very strange. You think somebody would at least come back and say, well, the capital of Palestine is East Jerusalem, but nobody's ever done that. And I'm just curious why we keep missing this boat when we're on the end of the pier.
Maurice.
Unfortunately, I don't know. I really don't know to answer that question. It's something that I present over and over and over and over again. And I talk about it and I write about it. There is no Palestine. There never has been a Palestine. Palestine has no borders whatsoever. When I wrote, again, you can look again on the JCFA's website. I wrote an article about just about 2 months ago, when when Macron first floated this idea of recognizing the state of Palestine, asking those very same questions, pointing to the principles of recognizing statehood from 1931, the Montevideo Convention, that they can't meet, that they haven't met. When you talk about analysis and really discussion of this drive for Palestinian statehood that requires effective governance over a specific territory, well, the PLO is requesting the recognition. They have nothing to do with Gaza for the last 20 years. And that's been one of the sticking points. Well, are you going to recognize Palestine as only the West Bank, as they call it, and East Jerusalem? But what about Gaza? Because that's just not part of your control. No one really cares about answering any of these questions. the recognition that they're giving is reinventing or rewriting international law, or as I said at the beginning of the presentation, it's just creating a Jew-specific standard and a Palestinian-specific standard of zero expectations, and really let's waive everything because the poor Palestinians are murdering Jews and then claiming victimhood. So we then have to change the world order. That's really what's being done.
Okay, we have time for just one more question. Ayala Graham, please. Ayala, please come off mute. You're on mute, Ayala.
Yeah.
Oh, right,
Hi.
fine.
It's not really a question. It's more of a question or a statement that I don't believe that you can never win the Hamas because it's ideology and you can't win an ideology. So I feel much more effort should be done into finding ways of talking. I know Hamas is horrible, evil, and everything, but I don't think that the government of Israel, the current government of Israel, has done enough or is doing enough to get the hostages back and to find new ways of trying to dismiss Hamas from being the leaders of the Palestinians, to find other leaders. It's as much as up to us Israelis to find a way to the other way. And I know it might sound very naive, but I was a bit horrified of the speaker that 2 speakers away was saying, let's bomb them all, never mind about the hostages. No. At the moment to save the state of Israel, hostages alive and dead has to be back in Israel, or the whole spirit of Israel will be lost.
Thank you, Ayala. Maurice.
So I would give a few answers to that. Firstly, you cannot negotiate with the devil. It's like talking to Adolf Hitler about how many Jews he's going to gas today in Auschwitz. That is discussions with Hamas. There is nothing to discuss with them. Unfortunately, they do not believe in our right to live, our right to exist. And therefore, any type of discussion with them just feeds into their desire to survive another day, to murder more Jews. And I don't believe that that is something that we can do. You can destroy an ideology. Of course you can. We did it. The world did it with the Nazis and Nazism. Obviously, there are not small amounts of these garden variety neo-Nazis running around, and I don't make light of them. But predominantly as an ideology, Nazism has been eradicated. And in the same way as Nazism was eradicated, Hamas, which is its intellectual, ideological partner, brother, Siamese twin, can also be similarly, I believe, eradicated. What we need to do, and I believe that this is part of the plan going forward in Gaza and thereafter in Judea and Samaria. It's a very, very simple process that needs to be done. It's killing the terrorists on the one hand, and then re-educating the population, teaching them a very, very simple idea. It's not okay to murder Jews. It'll be like Bart Simpson writing on the blackboard. Write 5,000 times, it's not okay to murder Jews. It's not okay to murder Jews. That's all we need to teach them. And then once we've got over their desire to murder Jews, then I think we can move forward to some type of coexistence. At the moment, all they're hearing, the brainwashing from Hamas, from the Palestinian Authority, is that it is okay to murder Jews, that it's a good thing to murder Jews, that you get financially rewarded for murdering Jews, and so really it's a collision course of it's not a battle of civilizations. It's a battle of civilization against barbarism. That's as the second point. I think that whilst we are obviously devastated that there are still 50 hostages in Gaza, let's not forget the cup that is mostly full. On the 7th of October, there were 254 hostages in Gaza, and 200 have been returned. So I don't think that we can say that the government isn't doing enough. There isn't enough that we have to give Hamas. They will never release the hostages. They will never give up on it. Anyone who tells you that you can come up with a deal, all the hostages for some type of thing, is misleading you, is lying to you, fundamentally misunderstands who and what Hamas is. They will never release the hostages. And so there will always be a time where we will have no alternative other than to go into Gaza and free the hostages by power of force. And the sooner we do that, the better chance to life that we give to the hostages. And really, that's where we stand. I understand that obviously it is a sensitive subject, but Israel didn't lose its soul over the soldiers who were captured and killed in Lebanon, and their bodies were held. We didn't lose our soul over Ron Arad. It didn't appear that anyone was losing their soul in Israel over the fact that Hamas was holding Hadar Goldin's body or on Shaul's body. That thank God we've managed to return. Hadar is still waiting there for us, and we will get to Hadar as well. But I think it's a far step to say that is the essence of all of the soul of Israel. I would, on that subject, beg to differ, I'm afraid.
Maurice, have we got time for 2 more questions?
From my point of view, yes.
Lovely. Gary O.
It's just an extra bill that I'll send you, Gary.
Hi. Apologies, I arrived late. I didn't see your presentation, but I've seen lots of IDF YouTube videos, so I think it's probably quite similar. First of all, just to correct you, recent polling shows that Hamas support has dropped considerably in Gaza, and there are many more anti-Hamas demonstrations, which of course is very risky for Gazans to take part in, because they'll get shot.
What's your source for that, Gary?
My source?
Yeah.
I'm very happy to provide that. If you want to give me your email via Gary Mond, I mean, it will take me a few moments.
I'm looking at an opinion poll from the Palestinian Center for Policy and Survey Research, ran by Dr. Khalil Shkaki, the brother of Fathi Shkaki, the founder of Palestinian Islamic Jihad, from the 6th of May 2025.
Okay.
Still shows tremendous support for Hamas.
There is, no, I didn't say there wasn't still a considerable support. I was saying it was declining, and there were many more anti-Hamas demonstrations.
Could you speak up a bit, Gary? We can hardly hear you.
Really?
That's a bit better.
I got a huge microphone here. The source is I think it's probably the same place, PCPSR.
Yeah.
.org. Yeah, it's the same source. And maybe it's the same source as you. Anyway, my main point is, and I've already said this in the chat, these conversations are very polarizing. There's either, it's a bit like Animal Farm, two legs bad, 4 legs good, or whichever way around it is. There's a middle ground. The fact is that you can't blame a whole population. They may have voted, or some of them.
Can you get to your question, because we're coming to the end of the meeting, Gary, and we've got another person to ask.
Okay.
Please.
The destruction, you can't argue with the destruction that's taken place. You can't argue with the population that's have to moved all the time. You can't argue with the deaths outside of the Hamas terrorist deaths. This will just be poison for future terrorists.
Maurice, what do you say?
No, that's and that I'm afraid is akin to saying that since we killed the Nazis, all of the Germans are now going to more hate the Jews and more hate the rest of the world. I don't believe that that's true. As I said in the answer to Gary's question at the beginning, there is still the majority of the Gazan population that supports Hamas. It may be down, but it's still certainly still high. I don't know what you mean when you say you can't argue with the destruction and you can't argue with the movement of the people. The destruction is a result of Hamas intentionally placing its terror infrastructure in schools, in mosques, in hospitals, in clinics, in kindergartens, in every single in the bedrooms of their children, hiding weapons under their beds, digging 650 kilometers of tunnels underneath the Gaza Strip, under UN facilities. We saw the killing of Mohammed Sinwar under the European hospital. We saw the terrorists taking hostages from October 7 into the Al Shifa hospital. I think that I would possibly beg to differ on that question of, well, it's unequivocal that there is destruction. Of course there's destruction, and Hamas is responsible for that destruction. I believe that we can kill Hamas, and if the Gazan population sees killing genocidal terrorists who want to murder Jews as their waking aspiration, as a reason for them to carry on with terrorism, then I'm very sorry for them that they've so lost their moral compass. And for anyone who supports that type of a proposition, I think that is substantially wrong.
Thank you, Maurice. Jeremy L. Jeremy L., will you come off mute, please?
Yes, hi. Thank you so much for this interesting presentation. Look, I mean, it's easy for me to say, isn't it, in the comfy UK to say this, but well, first of all, I can't accept that. I can't accept that we've had 200 out, and therefore the 20 can just, okay, there's 20 left, and we'll just, they can go under the.
If that was misunderstood for me, Jeremy, God forbid. I'm just saying that it's not all bad. We have a lot of work to do, and we have to get every single hostage back.
Thank you very much.
Without question, and the sooner the better. If in any way that was previously misunderstood, then I apologize.
Thank you for that clarification. But my main point and quick point is this. Look, we had, as much as I loathe Hamas as everybody else on this call, we did have a process at one time where there was trade-offs, where there was, you remember those televised handovers, where there was hundreds of our prisoners for hundreds of prisoners we were holding for our hostages and so on. We had all that. And there was a list which was being worked through, as I understand it, of which was agreed somehow through these mediators that we don't trust, of the held hostages that were coming out, and some did come out. Why, as much as I loathe Hamas, clearly that setup was acceptable then. Why can we not go back to that? Somebody must have negotiated with them then to get those people out, and there were those televised propaganda handovers. But we can't now go back to that. Now the only option is blazing guns, bang, 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 let's flatten it, let's go in. And that's what I'm hearing.
Maurice.
So the answer is, Jeremy, if you remember, just a few weeks ago, there were extensive discussions regarding another possible ceasefire, another possible prisoner release, and the body, the side that really did destroy those talks, as both the Qataris, even the Qataris, said and blamed Hamas for walking away from the table and for imposing conditions that were clearly unacceptable. That's something which is public knowledge and public record. So really, the only option isn't only guns blazing. If you have another side that is rational, that can be persuaded to see the best interests of the Gazan people, and to discuss and negotiate in a bona fide manner. But you don't have that. You have genocidal terrorists on the other side, who only when it's convenient and good for them are they willing to negotiate. And now really they're seeing, well, now it's getting to the money time. And do they give up on their insurance policies, which is the hostages, or do they think about the best interests of the Gazan people, or do they do what they've done until now, think only about themselves? To hell with the Gazan people, to hell with the people dying, and let the hostages suffer, that they can put up pictures of Eviatar David, skin and bones, being forced to dig his own grave. This is barbarism. This is depravity of a level that I don't think the world has really seen for probably 80, 90 years.
Yes, I agree with that.
Thank you, Maurice. Okay, the last
Thank you.
question, Julie Ruth, you're the last question. Julie, could you come off mute and, if possible, turn your camera on? Ah, you don't seem to be there. Julie? Okay, right. Well, in that case,
Hello,
you are
hello.
there. Julia.
Sorry. Good evening, Maurice and Gary. Just a question about negotiations in the future. Here in Northern Ireland, obviously I'm making a comparison. We had a 30-year conflict in Israel and Gaza. It's a war. So in the future, if obviously there has to be peace for the people of Gaza, is it going to be like here 27 years later, where communities are going to be surrounded with high brick walls to keep each separate community apart and each separate community safe? What is the future going to be like?
Thank you, Julie. Maurice.
So I don't know. I would like to believe that the future in Gaza can be the same as Haifa, as Ramla, as Lod, as Akko, where you have Jews and Arabs living together side by side, prospering, building futures for their children, building great towering hotels for everyone to enjoy, rather than digging attack tunnels. And I don't see a reason why there should be separation. Israel's hand has always been outstretched to peace and coexistence. The problem is it needs two to tango. And on the other side, you have fanatical jihadi terrorists who all they want to do is murder everyone. That once they finished, as they say themselves, once we're finished with the Saturday people, we'll get on to the Sunday people. That's what we're dealing with, unfortunately.
How do you negotiate with terrorists?
So how do you negotiate with someone who says, "Well, I'm going to murder you"? Well, only half murder me. Only murder 2 of my 4 children. God forbid. You can't talk with these people. The response needs to be crushing. They need to be eradicated. And again, I'm not talking about all of the Gazan people, God forbid. No one should take that out of context or misunderstand. I'm not advocating killing all of the Gazans in any way, shape, or form. I believe that Hamas needs to be destroyed. Hamas is at best a few thousands more of the Gazan population, and then we can all move on to a better.
Misunderstood.
Thank you. Bernie Arotz, you've just come in with the last minute question.
Thank you. I just want to say thank you, the speaker, Maurice, because your presentation was really insightful. And I want to say that I agree entirely with every single word that you have said today here. Israel, this is something that staggers me about Starmer and all of those international leaders, that they expect Israel to negotiate a ceasefire and then enter into peace negotiations with terrorists. And then by doing that, they are legitimizing, sorry, my Spanish is coming through, a terrorist groups and the genocidal intentions. I have read carefully and dissected Hamas charter, and it's terrifying. Israel have no choice but to completely exterminate Hamas, because if they go on to a ceasefire, then you are giving them the chance to gain strength again. So
thank you very much, Bernie. Maurice.
It's exactly that. Unfortunately, Hamas has this goal of destroying Israel, of destroying the Jewish people. They are Islamic fundamentalists. They believe in promoting the hadith that says in the end of days, the rocks and the trees will cry out to the believers in Muhammad that there's a Jew hiding behind me, come and kill him. This is something that you can't discuss or negotiate with. But let there be no mistake. And this I must add, Gary, even if it means going for just 1 more minute. There is not much difference, if any, between the PLO, Mahmoud Abbas, and his bunch of terrorists and Hamas. They similarly believe in the destruction of the state of Israel, in the expulsion or the murder of the Jews that are left in Israel, and they cannot be trusted anymore. And in the same way as we need to ensure that we eradicate Hamas, we cannot fool ourselves to believe that they're moderate so-called brothers in Ramallah who have an institutional, legislatively entrenched system of rewarding people for murdering Jews are any better. So let's not mistake that either.
Thank you very much. In a moment, I'm going to ask Keith Rowe, our Vice Chairman, to propose a vote of thanks. I just want to tell you about the next meeting. The next Zoom meeting is on Tuesday, the 2nd of September. A very different type of meeting where the guest speaker will be Zia Yusuf, who some of you will have heard of, is a former chairman of Reform UK. He's going to be talking about politics in the social media age, particularly focusing on anti-Semitism and anti-Muslim hatred. So that's Zia Yusuf will be addressing us on the 2nd of September. Okay, Keith, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Thank you, Gary. And on behalf of everybody in the NJA and on this meeting tonight, I'd like to thank our guest speaker, Lieutenant Colonel Maurice Hirsch. You know, it's we're so used to hearing speakers these days, particularly our politicians. They obfuscate. They won't give a straight answer to a question. They avoid answering the question that they get asked. And it has been really refreshing for me, not only because a lot of what you say, or pretty much everything you say, have I agreed with, but you've answered every question directly in a really blunt manner that suits me down to the ground, because we've had a straight answer. And, you know, we don't get that very often these days. You've confirmed to me so much of what I've been thinking over these last few months about the not just the lack of PR from Israel, but the paid for lies of our enemies, the general levels of evil believed by our enemies, and in particular, the way that our politicians are so complicit and just in their own self-interest. You've confirmed all that to us and everybody this evening in a very eloquent manner. We could be left in no doubt at all now what our politicians think of what's going on, what our enemies think. And what I would just like to say on behalf of everybody here is, first of all, keep doing and saying what you're saying, because we need you and more like you out there doing what you're doing. And please, can we get you on the BBC? Can we get you on Sky? Can we get you on all of these other media channels? Because they're not hearing it. They're only listening to their own echo chamber, which is so flawed. You've explained tonight for us all so well exactly what I would believe to be the right arguments. Thank you so much for being with us this evening. I hope that maybe we'll progress things with you in the future and hear from you again. And it's been really refreshing. Thank you very much.